The first explosion tore through the frozen air at 1:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in January. Forward Operating Base Granite sat in a valley 8,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by ridge lines that trapped sound and magnified it into something primal. The blast echoed 3 times before the alarm siren started screaming. Smoke rose black against the white world. Soldiers scrambled from prefab buildings, boots slipping on ice-slicked ground. This was supposed to be a quiet posting, border monitoring, equipment maintenance, counting days until rotation. Nobody expected contact. Nobody expected war. And nobody, not one single person on that base, expected the woman in the visitor quarters to save them all. As we dive into this story, hit that like button and subscribe. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Catherine Hayes had arrived 6 hours earlier, carrying a wool scarf and a thermos of coffee. No uniform, no insignia, just a wife visiting her husband in the middle of winter. She signed the visitor log with cold fingers. The corporal at the gate barely glanced at her ID. She looked harmless, ordinary, a civilian in jeans and a thermal jacket, here to spend 2 days with Captain David Hayes before driving back down the mountain. But in her duffel bag, beneath the spare clothes and paperback novel, was a ballistics calculator and a Leupold scope still in its protective case. Old habits. Tools she told herself she'd never need again. She was wrong. Forward Operating Base Granite housed 27 soldiers in January 2025. Base sat on the eastern border of a disputed territorial zone, a place where 3 nations met and none wanted responsibility. The mission was simple: watch, report, maintain presence. The threat level was classified as low. Intelligence suggested the area was stable. The sensors on the perimeter had been giving false alarms for weeks. Deer, they said, branches falling under snow weight, equipment malfunction. Nobody questioned it. Nobody looked at the pattern. Nobody realized they were being mapped, studied, measured for an assault that had been planned down to the minute. Catherine was a ghost. That's what her spotter used to call her. Ghost 1, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, Scout Sniper Platoon. She'd earned the call sign in Fallujah during the Second Battle in 2004 when she was 23 years old. 2 deployments, 8 years of service, 143 confirmed kills at distances ranging from 300 meters to just over 1,000. She'd been one of fewer than 300 active-duty scout snipers in the entire Marine Corps, and one of only 12 women to ever hold the designation. She could read wind by watching grass bend. She could calculate bullet drop in her head faster than most people could type it into a computer. She'd once held a firing position for 19 hours without moving, waiting for a target that never appeared. And then one day in Fallujah, she'd had a shot. A high-value target. Perfect conditions, clean line of fire. But he was holding a child. His daughter, they learned later. Using her as a shield, her spotter told her to take the shot anyway. The mission was too important. She refused. She let him go. He killed 17 people the next week in a suicide bombing. She left the Marines 4 months later. Told herself she'd never hold a rifle again. David didn't know. In 8 years of marriage, she'd never told him. She'd met him at a VA hospital where she was volunteering, and he was recovering from a shoulder injury. He knew she'd been in the service. He knew it had been hard. But he didn't know the specifics. Didn't know about the training or the deployments or the nights she still woke up calculating windage in her sleep. She'd wanted to be someone else, someone normal, someone who didn't see every elevation and ridgeline as a potential firing position. She'd built a life around that lie. And now, as fire rained down on the base and soldiers died in the snow, the lie was burning away. The attackers hit the north perimeter first. Coordinated explosions along a 100-meter stretch of fence line. The blasts were shaped charges, military grade, placed with precision to create overlapping kill zones. 2 soldiers went down in the first 5 seconds. A third was crawling toward cover when a burst of automatic fire cut him down. The incoming rounds came from 3 positions on the north ridge, staggered at different elevations to create interlocking fields of fire. High, mid, and low. Textbook. Professional. This wasn't random. This wasn't militia. This was a trained assault force executing a plan they'd rehearsed. Catherine was in the command trailer when it started. She'd been watching David adjust a radio set, listening to him complain about equipment failures and sensor malfunctions. When the first explosion hit, she felt it in her chest before she heard it. That deep compression wave that travels through bone. David grabbed his rifle and ran. Catherine followed. Outside, the world had transformed into chaos. Smoke, fire, screaming, the cracked snap of bullets overhead. Soldiers were returning fire, but hitting nothing. They couldn't see the enemy through the smoke and distance. They were shooting at sound, at shadows, at nothing. She found David at a defensive position behind a concrete barrier. He was shouting into a radio handset. Base Granite to Regional Command. We are under attack. Repeat, under attack? Requesting immediate support. Only static answered. The communications array had been hit in the first volley, or it was being jammed. Either way, they were alone, isolated. David looked at her with something close to panic. Get to the bunker. South side. Go now. But Catherine wasn't moving. She was watching the pattern of fire, counting the seconds between bursts, reading the rhythm. She could see what the others couldn't. The attackers had an overwatch position, high on the ridge. A machine gunner coordinating the assault, calling targets, directing fire. As long as he was operational, the base was lost. She ran to the armory, found David's backup rifle, an M110 semi-automatic, stripped for parts, but functional. She checked the bolt, worked the action, loaded a magazine. The movements came back instantly. Muscle memory from another life. David appeared in the doorway, face pale with shock. Cat, what are you doing? She didn't answer. She was already moving, gathering equipment, running calculations in her head. She had to get to elevation, had to find an angle, the south ridge. 400 meters from the base, but it would give her line of sight to the north ridge, to the overwatch position, to the machine gunner who was killing her husband's soldiers. Sergeant Williams created the diversion. He took a squad to the east side and opened up with everything they had. Heavy, sustained fire toward the north ridge. Loud, angry, drawing attention. Catherine used the noise to move. She crossed 200 meters of open ground in 3 minutes, staying low, using smoke for cover. Then she started climbing. The rock face was steep and slick with ice. Her fingers found holds. Her boots scraped for purchase. 50 feet up, 75. Her lungs burned in the thin air. The rifle across her back felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The ledge was narrow, 4 feet deep, maybe 8 feet wide. She bellied down on frozen stone and swept snow away with her forearm, set up the rifle, pulled out the spotting scope. Through the lens she glassed the north ridge. Smoke obscured most of it, but she caught movement, a shape behind a fallen log. Muzzle flash, then higher, behind better concealment, she saw him. The machine gunner, white parka, face wrapped. Professional gear. He fired a burst, 9 rounds, barrel change coming. She ranged him, 630 meters. Wind from the northwest at 15 miles per hour, gusting higher. Temperature 8 degrees Celsius. She ran the calculations, adjusted for elevation, for wind drift, for the cold air density. The math came back instantly, pulled from 8 years of training that her body had never forgotten. She settled into the scope, controlled her breathing. In, out, slow. The crosshair drifted with her heartbeat. Steady, steady. The machine gunner reached for the barrel assembly. She took up the slack in the trigger, felt the wall, pressed through. The rifle bucked. The crack of the shot rolled across the valley like thunder. Through the scope she saw the impact. The gunner jerked backward. His weapon tilted. He slumped over the gun and didn't move. Silence. For 3 seconds the entire battlefield went still. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the shocked, hollow pause that follows something decisive. The machine gun fell silent mid-burst. Tracers stopped stitching the air. Men on both sides hesitated, trying to understand what had just happened. A weapon that had dominated the fight, pinning the defenders, controlling movement, dictating survival, was suddenly gone. Catherine didn't hesitate. She worked the bolt with practiced economy. Metal slid against metal. The empty casing spun away and vanished into the snow. She chambered the next round and settled back into the rifle, her breathing slow, distant, almost detached. The world narrowed to glass and reticle and wind. Her second target resolved in the scope, a rifle team positioned at mid-elevation, halfway up the slope. They were still trying to make sense of the silence above them. One man stood up, exposing his full profile as he craned his neck uphill, searching for answers. It was a fatal mistake. Catherine exhaled. The trigger broke cleanly. The man folded where he stood, dropped as if gravity had suddenly claimed him. His partner froze, shock locking his body in place. Now they knew. Someone was shooting at them. The attackers scattered, discipline cracking under sudden, invisible pressure. Shouts echoed. Orders overlapped. Men dove for cover that no longer protected them. Catherine tracked the movement without urgency. Panic created predictability. Predictability created targets. Below her position, David's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding over the radio. Push. They're breaking. Push now. The defenders surged forward, boots crunching through snow and debris, reclaiming ground that had been lost minutes earlier. The momentum of the fight shifted decisively, like a lever finally pulled in the right direction. Catherine kept shooting. Third shot. A spotter trying to relocate, low-crawling through scrub and rock. He made it 5 yards before the round found him. Fourth shot. A radio operator barking coordinates into a handset, still trying to reach the Overwatch team that was already dead. The call ended mid-syllable. Fifth shot. A runner sprinting for a new firing position, carrying messages the old way now that radios were failing. She squeezed, missed barely. Snow kicked up behind him. She corrected for movement, adjusted a hair to the left, and fired again. He went down hard, sliding a short distance before coming to rest. She didn't feel triumph or anger or fear, only focus. The assault unraveled rapidly after that, without overwatch, without coordinated fire, without anyone controlling the battlefield from above. The attackers became what they truly were, individuals trying to survive. Some fired wildly, some crawled, some simply ran. Someone made the call to withdraw. Catherine watched them pull back through her scope, disciplined even in retreat, covering one another as they disappeared into the terrain. She could have kept firing. She had ammunition. She had angles. She had opportunity. She let them go. Her job wasn't to kill everyone. It never had been. It was to break the attack, to fracture momentum, to buy time, to give the base a chance to live. She checked her rifle. 9 rounds fired. 7 confirmed kills, 2 uncertain. 12 minutes from setup to cease fire. When she climbed down from her position, the base was alive with controlled chaos. Soldiers moved through drifting smoke and falling snow, weapons up, voices sharp and efficient. Medics worked on the wounded. Engineers extinguished small fires along the perimeter. Damage assessments were already underway. 3 dead, 7 wounded. It could have been everyone. David found her at the south fence line. His helmet was scuffed, his uniform stained with snow and ash. He stopped a few feet away and just looked at her. In his eyes were 2 questions. The first was relief. The second was something deeper, confusion, recognition, fear, maybe. As if pieces he hadn't known existed were suddenly snapping into place. "Who are you?" he asked. Not angry, not accusing, just lost. Like he was staring at a stranger wearing his wife's face. So she told him everything. 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, Scout Sniper Platoon. 8 years, 2 deployments. 143 confirmed kills before today. She told him about Fallujah, about the shot she didn't take, about choosing a child's life over a mission and the 17 people who died because of that choice. She told him about the years afterward, the silence, the shame, the effort it took to pretend she was someone else. He didn't interrupt, didn't look away. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. The snow fell between them, soft and steady. Finally, he said, "I need time to understand this, to understand you." She nodded. That was fair. She had spent 8 years hiding the truth from the man she loved. The least she could give him now was time to decide what that truth meant. The investigation took weeks, not days, not a quick debrief and a handshake. Weeks of sealed rooms and clipped voices. Military intelligence combed through every second of footage, every radio transmission, every shell casing recovered from the snow. Counterterrorism units reconstructed the attack frame by frame, mapping angles, trajectories, fields of fire. They wanted to know how the perimeter failed, how 7 attackers breached what should have been an impenetrable position. And most of all, they wanted to understand the variable they hadn't planned for the woman who stopped them. The official report came back sterile and cautious. Coordinated defensive response. Multiple shooters. Enemy neutralized by base personnel. Her name appeared once, buried in an appendix, reduced to a footnote. The military preferred it that way. Civilian heroics complicated command structures. Legends created questions. and questions made people uncomfortable. It was easier to say the system worked than to admit it had been saved by something outside its control. But everyone on Forward Operating Base Granite knew the truth. They'd been there. They'd seen the first tower go dark, heard the panic in the radio chatter, felt the helplessness as the attack began to fold inward. And then they'd seen it, watched the tempo shift, watched the enemy break, watched bodies fall in places that didn't make sense unless someone was shaping the fight from afar. They'd seen a woman lying prone in the snow, calm as a glacier, ending a battle before it could swallow them whole. Catherine drove away 3 days later. The base receded in her rearview mirror, concrete and wire shrinking until it vanished behind rolling hills and white sky. The road stretched out ahead, empty and indifferent. David had stood beside the car that morning, hands in his pockets, eyes tired in a way she hadn't seen before. He asked her to stay. Not begged, just asked. Sighed they could talk, take leave. Try to understand what had cracked open between them. She'd shaken her head, not because she didn't care, but because caring wasn't enough right now. He needed space. So did she? Whatever they were had been built on a version of her that no longer existed, or maybe never had. They'd talk eventually. Or they wouldn't. Either way, the secret was out, and the life she'd carefully assembled around it had fractured. She'd have to decide what pieces were worth salvaging. The rifle rested in her trunk, wrapped in a blanket like something fragile, almost sacred. David had insisted she'd take it. For protection, he'd said, forcing a half-smile. They both knew better. It wasn't about danger on the road. It was about identity, about acknowledgement. Part of her needed that weight nearby. Would always need it. She could still read the wind by watching tree branches tremble, still judge distance by the way light flattened against snow, still calculate drop, drift, probability cold math applied to living targets. She hadn't lost the skill. It had simply gone dormant, waiting. Maybe she'd never stopped being a sniper. Maybe she'd just been a sniper pretending to be someone else, playing house with a quieter life and hoping muscle memory would fade. She drove south through bands of snow and sudden sunlight, through towns that didn't know her name and never would. Heading home, or what passed for home now. Each mile put distance between her and the base, but none between her and the echo of the shots. Somewhere behind her, on a ridge no one would mark on a map, 7 men had learned what it meant to be hunted by someone who never missed. They had crossed an invisible line and paid for it, without ever seeing the face of the woman who ended them. And on a base that should have fallen, 24 soldiers were alive, because a visitor had carried more than a wool scarf that day. She'd carried a past she thought she'd buried, a skill she believed she'd outgrown, a silence she had maintained for years until the world demanded it break. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless, erasing tracks almost as fast as they were made. But some things couldn't be covered. Some things waited. The shots still echoed in her mind, sharp and final. Catherine Hayes kept driving, alone on a white road, wondering if anyone ever truly leaves who they were behind, or if the past simply waits, patient and quiet, until the moment it's needed again.